Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church on this very wet Sunday. I'm grateful for every drop, aren't you? Yeah, so glad, so glad. Welcome to those of you who are watching online, staying dry and safe. We're glad for your presence here as well. I have a few announcements as we get started today. First, our church this year is partnered with the Coalition of Religious Communities, known as CORC, and we are still collecting diapers, blankets, and other items. You can find the donation bins located just outside the little chapel, which is through Elliott Hall and into the hallway. Just consider picking up one of those items when you're out doing your grocery shopping this week. And if you're available this Thursday at 10 o'clock, consider joining the coalition at the state capitol for CORC's annual advocacy day. We'd love to see you there. Next, y'all know I love a praise report, so here it comes. Our congregation raised over $3,900 for First United Methodist on Christmas Eve. Yeah. Yep, in support of their overnight movie nights for the unsheltered, combined with over $2,000 from South Valley, the UUs of Salt Lake were able to contribute around $6,000 to this effort. That's awesome. So First United Methodist is still looking for volunteers for movie nights. Last week, Reverend Ian sent out a video message to your inbox, along with Reverend A.J. Bush from that church. And I think that email is probably the best place right now to find the link to volunteer. So look for that email. If you really want to volunteer and you can't find it, reach out to me and I will be happy to forward it to you. Next, a big thank you to everyone who came out yesterday to rally on behalf of the Great Salt Lake. There were about 40 of us, including kids, and special thanks to those adults who brought their young friends to the rally. It was a joy to see you all there. The next few weeks will be lake-full weeks for our church as we center our action for justice on saving the lake. This week, there's a Zoom session hosted by our own Kathy Chambliss and Steve Glazer, called How to Talk with Legislators and Other Elected Officials So They Can Listen. Now that's good advice for advocacy on all kinds of issues, not just the lake. Registration is required, so look at our website or the Torch email for registration information. Heal Utah has lobbying sessions Tuesdays and Thursdays during the session, 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. up at the Capitol or on Zoom. Then there are some events that are happening at the lake herself. I encourage you to visit riverwriting.com to see all of the wonderful events that are hosted by our friend Nan Seymour. I'll be participating in some of the 7 a.m. meditation sessions on Zoom. There are also guided hikes, campfire circles, writing workshops, and more. Most of these things do require pre-registration, so go to that website, riverwriting.com. And finally, as many of you by now know, Nan will be renewing her 45-day vigil at the lake during the legislative session. And this year, we will join her camping on Antelope Island. Jim Turner, one of our members, has graciously donated the use of his camper and will be on Antelope Island as Nan's neighbor, taking turns spending the night out there. You should have received a little flyer. They're throughout the chapel. There's also a QR code if you want to share with somebody, so you can get all the details about how to camp out there, how to sign up, what to do, what to know. And you can also talk to any member of our environmental ministry team. Any of y'all in here could raise your hands, and they can ask you questions. Steve, Joan is also out here, I think, at the social justice table. Welcome this morning to Kristen Quinn, who is our lay minister for today. A wonderful message that she's bringing. Looking forward to hearing it again. And now we begin our worship service. This weekend, as many Americans pause to remember the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to remember and renew our commitments to racial justice and public service, I'm reminded of the words of the UU minister and Black humanist theologian William Jones, who said that racial justice today requires burying Dr. King and no longer praising him. What he meant was not that Dr. King's memory was no longer worthy of praise, far from it. He meant that Dr. King would not want us to be stuck in the 1960s, and he would not want to be worshiped, but he would want us to find the growing edge for this moment. And so that's where we will focus our attention this morning. It is with this spirit of restlessness that I light our chalice today. May I invite you to rise with me in body or in spirit, and let's sing together number 1018. That's right, isn't it? 1018, okay. That's in your teal hymnal. And if you can do without it, do without it. You could probably sing this without the hymnal. Give it a shot. Justice. There'll be justice in that land. 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 Singing. There'll be
You don't look okay. These words were said to me in a kind, compassionate voice by a mustached 20-something on an airplane. We had been stuck on the tarmac in Denver for over an hour on a plane I had bought a ticket on just hours earlier. I was hoping to get to my mom's bedside before she died. While delayed, I was receiving text messages from family members essentially saying, "Mom's waiting for you. We don't know how much longer she can hold on." Talk about pressure. This young man was right. I was not okay. I gave him a weary smile and said, "I'm not okay right now. I appreciate you noticing." And I did appreciate him noticing. We can feel invisible, during those times when we're not okay. He pulled a rock out of his carry-on bag and handed it to me. He told me what kind of rock it was. Honestly, I don't remember, but I still have it, and that it contained the vibrations of the earth and could help ground me. He said, "It seems like there has been a lot of pain in the world lately, and I've been trying to figure out what can help. Rocks can help," he said. Then he said, "I hope you get what you need to be okay." Now, I don't really know if I believe that rocks are the answer to peace on earth. I did not actually feel that rock vibrating. But "you don't look okay," followed by "I hope you get what you need to be okay," were probably some of the kindest words anyone has ever said to me. His hope for me seemed to be open-ended and without strings. He noticed me and didn't seem bothered by my present condition. He didn't feel the need to ask what was wrong or try to fix me. He just noticed and offered hope. Despite not fully buying into the power of the rock, it stayed in my hand. Every time the pilot announced another delay, I rubbed my thumb across the rock and breathed in deeply. When I finally got off the plane and got in the car with my parents' well-meaning yet overbearing friends, I rubbed the rock. When I got to the hospital and my mom's room was full of people, the usual immediate family and some whom I did not know, I rubbed the rock. It seems it was grounding me. As I entered the room where my mom lay dying, I felt overwhelmed. There were so many people. They all left as soon as I entered and gave me some time with my mom. I told her about the rock and the young man. She always liked meeting people and getting to know them, and she always liked a good story. After a short time, people started coming back into the room. The rock stayed in my hand as I listened to their stories, the stories of how my mom impacted their lives. There was a set of sisters who introduced themselves as Yummy and Tasty, no joke, who were teachers' aides in the high school special needs class my mom taught in. They told me about how my mom taught them to create a budget and how to stick to it. They said she believed in us and took the time to help us. There was my brother's ex-wife's boyfriend, who mentioned that my mom welcomed him into the family with open arms. There were the ladies from her bridge groups who told funny stories about their time together. Her beloved minister was there, with stories about the notes she used to leave in the nursery, directing people how to clean properly. There was the mom of a young man from the special needs class. She told me about how her son had sent my mom to the emergency room just a week prior. It appears my mom had walked behind him, startling him, and he hit her. My mom apologized to this boy's mom for upsetting him, saying she should have remembered he startled easily. This mom felt that her son had been unconditionally valued by someone. All these people were drawn to my mom's room and felt they had a place there. I told stories no one had heard before, like the time when she was 19 years old and working at a bank in Boston. She was held up at gunpoint. Her response? She batted the gun away and said, "Young man, put that away. You're going to get into a lot of trouble." When she told the story, she said she thought he was in a hard place and he didn't need any more problems. He apparently agreed, shook his head, and left. My mom had the ability to tell tough stories in a way that you couldn't help but laugh. The time I was abducted from a New York City department store as a baby, turns out that's a funny story. The time yet another man with a gun tried to break into our house in Ohio, while my dad and aunt hid under the table after calling the police, she did the dishes. She didn't want the police to see a messy kitchen. No one thought to check on the children. It's a funny story the way she told it. Interestingly, as we all told these stories, my mom's heart rate went down. Her blood pressure went down. She seemed to relax. I believe she could hear us and somehow knew the laughter meant we would be okay. I also think she enjoyed all the stories. Laughter has a way of instilling hope. More than anything, my mom needed to know that we would be okay. I like to think our laughter gave her that hope even as she died. A little like the hope the young man on the plane offered me. He seemed to suggest that I could be okay again. His hope for me made me feel this was possible, even when I was riddled with doubt. These seemingly small gestures and words we offer out into the world can make all the difference. Thanks.
Each year, the Unitarian Universalist Association's Side with Love campaign offers a month-long program called 30 Days of Love, beginning on Martin Luther King Sunday and ending on Valentine's Day. There's a weekly theme on a particular justice issue with corresponding spiritual practices to sustain us during the dark winter months and keep our hearts focused on love and justice. And the theme of the first week, starting tomorrow, is interdependence, with a focus on democracy and social justice, electoral justice, sorry. Now, I appreciate that the 30 Days of Love overlaps with the Utah legislative session. I'll be honest, I need the reminder because it's not always a time during which I am especially inclined toward love, necessarily. The ledge session brings out my fighting spirit, my mama bear spirit, the side of me that says, in the words of Dr. King, that those who love peace must be at least as well organized as those who love war. But when I think about it, it is love that motivates me to fight, isn't it? What do you love? Who do you love? What would you do for those you love? What wouldn't you do? There are many who need our love, our prayers, and our support. There are already bills filed that will harm trans kids and people needing abortion care if passed. There's much energy around saving our Great Salt Lake, but will that energy dissipate in the face of corporate interests? Will there finally be enough will to eliminate the tax on groceries? Will anyone finally stand up to the developers and do something about affordable housing that matters? I remember this past fall when I interviewed our church member Sherry Whitwer, who advocates on behalf of people living with mental illness in our state. And I asked her how she works with legislators who might have very different life experiences than the people for whom she's going to bat. And she told me that almost everyone nowadays has a family member who struggles. And it's painful for those families. People feel confused and unsure what to do, how to help. Sherry reaches for the common humanity between them, some shared experience, which really comes down to love, doesn't it? Love is the experience of shared humanity, the deep equality of being people together, sharing a community across deep difference. As Bell Hooks reminds us, love isn't a feeling, it's action. So as we head into the 45 days when actions are taken for and against the people of our state, we ask ourselves once more, what do you love? Who do you love? What would you do for those you love? What wouldn't you do? How are we living into love during this time when so much is at stake? And who can we count on to rise up alongside us? reach out to them this week. Those individuals and organizations that share your loves, and ask what you can do to side with love between now and March 3rd when the session ends, and then follow through on it as an act of faith. It will take all of us siding with love to make that love real in Utah. That's one of my favorites. I grew up singing that one in church. Did you? Yeah. Man, that gives me some old-time religion. All right, I'm not going to impose it on you, though. So next Sunday, it's the time you've all been waiting for, the kickoff of our pledge campaign. I know. You've been waiting. It's almost here. It's such an exciting time in our church when we take time to give thanks for everything this place means to us, when we promise to support it now and for the future. So this year is an especially important year as we prepare our church in so many ways to receive a new minister, and we want to be sure that we're really well funded to carry our mission forward together. Let me tell you about our goals for this year. Our dollar goal is an even $500,000. And we are confident that we can reach it together. We're also looking for 20 new pledges and for 20 families to increase their giving over last year. I know somebody out here is longing to be one of those people, and we want to make your dreams come true, right? We can do it. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home, find a Post-it note or an index card, write your last year pledge number on that card. Put it someplace where you see it every day. Your coffee pot, where your keys are, your nightstand, something like that, maybe your bathroom mirror. And as you go through the week, look at it and think, that's my commitment to this place, right? Think about your giving goals, maybe your overall spiritual goals, and what are the values that you're trying to cultivate in your life, and how does this church help you do that? And then think about your personal finances, what you expect starting in July and going through the next fiscal year, and maybe you've got a little extra. You can increase your pledge this year and how good that would feel. If you already know that an increase isn't in the cards for you this year, I still encourage you to try this exercise just to appreciate how good it feels to give to a cause that you believe in, how good it feels to support an institution that does so much for so many. And then come back next week for our kickoff and keep the good feeling going. Now, if you have questions about how we do giving here, you can ask me, you can ask Reverend Ian, or any member of our pledge team led by Becky Heel and Henry Whiteside. And please watch your mail, your snail mail. I know, the one you never check. I don't check it either. For our letter that's coming this week that will have a lot of the details inside. It'll be coming next week. For now, we engage in the weekly practice of generosity and gratitude as our greeters bring the plates around. You're always welcome to give electronically using the card that's in the pew in front of you. And thank you so much for your generosity. Why do we need 30 days of love? And what does it have to do with the work of justice? I take it as an invitation to consider why we do the work of justice, what motivates us, what moves us. We know that we do not pursue justice in the world because someone told us to. Unitarian Universalism is a non-creedal faith, which means that we are not guided by a creed, statement of belief. Each individual UU is trusted to pursue their own set of beliefs that guide them, hopefully with a full measure of humility, curiosity about the beliefs of others, as well as a healthy sense of humor about oneself. What brings us together as a people, as you often hear me say, is not our shared beliefs, but our shared covenant, our shared promises that we make to each other. But what covenant do we have with the world around us? Unitarian Universalists can be said to be both in the world and of the world. For us, whether we mean human society, our world community, or the whole of creation floating on our blue boat home, for us, the world is a marvel, a beauty, even in its brokenness, even in its vulnerability. The world is not a place from which we separate ourselves. It is a garden in which to immerse ourselves. We aren't looking ahead to the next world. We're living in and loving this one, the world we have. But we are also of the world. We bring real problems to church. We don't paste over our pain with platitudes. We live real lives. The promise of Unitarian Universalism is that you can bring your full self to this place. Your whole spiritual self, all your moving parts, your doubts and questions, the experiences that you can't always explain, but that shape you and make you who you are. Our theology asserts that we are born good. We start out whole, and we return to wholeness. And even when life breaks us, we retain that inherent wholeness our whole lives long. We reject conformity. We embrace diversity. The forces that molded you, the influences that informed you, the identities that you bear are invaluable and strengthen the diversity of our gathered congregations. Well, that's our ambition anyway. Do we always live up to it? Over the past few years, a groundswell of support has arisen in our association for the adoption of an 8th principle in addition to the 7 that we had before. The 8th principle reads as follows: journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. So far, at least 230 congregations and UU bodies have adopted the 8 principles, including ours. I'm proud to say that we were number 54 on the list. Good job, and it is something to be proud of. But there are those in our association who still ask, why do we need an 8th principle? Why do we need a separate principle calling us to the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression? For after all, the first principle affirms our inherent worth and dignity, which suggests inherent equity as well. Our 5th principle sets democracy as a religious value for us, inferring that the equality that true democracy demands. And so on. You can go with the 3rd principle, the 6th, the 7th, that inference that if the principles are properly observed, a commitment to racial justice is obligatory. But somehow it hasn't worked out the way we hoped. We look around in our association and we see that despite our prolonged commitment, many of our churches continue to be populated mostly by white people. We work for diversity in the world around us, but it isn't translating into diversity inside our walls. And we're not alone. Most majority white Protestant denominations in the U.S. are grappling with the same question. Some are still segregated, having developed a separate but equal stance generations ago that proved hard to dissolve. And even though our conjoined faith is only 60 years old, we too have to look back a couple of generations to uncover the roots of our difficulties with race. And we find that the 8th principle is not the first time our association has undertaken such a commitment. The merger of the American Unitarian Association with the Universalist Church in America happened in 1961. And just 4 years later, the infant UUA moved its denominational board meeting to Selma, Alabama, where civil rights forces were amassing to protest widespread voter suppression. As UUs from all over the country came to Selma, 2 of them, a minister and a laywoman, would be martyred for the cause. African Americans took notice of this new association and its people who seemed dedicated to the cause of racial justice, as well as their pluralistic and welcoming principles. And for a time, some of them were attracted to become UUs themselves, even Dr. King, who delivered the Ware Lecture to the General Assembly of 1966, considered a move, as documents owned by the UU Congregation of Atlanta demonstrate. UUs, both black and white, who wanted to be a part of this new racial future that was emerging in America, wanted to see their faith take meaningful action. 2 proposals emerged: the creation of a Black Affairs Council tasked with supporting African Americans in our faith, and a financial commitment of $250,000 each year for 4 years. But maybe you can guess what happened next. A financial crisis loomed in the fledgling association, and soon the officers of the UUA feared that they could not keep their $1 million promise to black UUs. It all came to a head at the General Assembly in 1969, as described by the preeminent scholar of African Americans in Unitarian Universalism, the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed. It was the middle of July, 1969. In Boston, Monday was 77 degrees and comfortable, but as the days passed, it grew hot and then hotter. In the Statler Hilton Hotel, where the Unitarian Universalist Association was holding its annual General Assembly, the meeting began normally, then exploded. On Monday, immediately following the opening ceremonies and greetings, the Black Unitarian Universalist Caucus commandeered the mics until a motion to reorder the agenda was debated. The motion was defeated. Tuesday morning, as the Assembly was about to hear from the candidates in the upcoming UUA presidential election, a motion was called to reconsider the caucus's motion from the day before. This motion to revisit the first motion passed, however, the motion itself was again defeated. Before the presidential candidates had a chance to address the greeting, it was pointed out that the members of the Black Caucus had left the hall. The candidates went ahead with their presentations, but immediately afterward, the Reverend Jack Mendelson, minister of the nearby Arlington Street Church, went to the procedural microphone. Calling this walkout one of the most serious events in the history of our movement, he asked to address the assembly. Mendelson announced that he could not remain and carry on with business as usual. He was going to the Arlington Street Church, and anyone who wished could join him. Many white supporters rose and followed him. Mendelson said that as he made his way up the aisle, his colleague, Horace Westwood, rose from his seat and spat in his face. What's clear from the written history is that racial justice was just a project for the predominantly white UUA in 1969, a project that could be jettisoned when the numbers no longer added up. The UUA was happy at that time to collect people of color, to prove our own goodness, rather than be transformed by these new relationships into something real and deep. Our faith might have more diverse churches everywhere today had the association not reneged on its commitment back then. For predominantly white churches of any tradition, the challenge is to stop seeing racial inclusion as a social justice project. People are not projects. Racial inclusion for us is an act of love for which we must be willing to sacrifice. Let me be even more clear. What I'm talking about is a church that is going to look different, sound different, feel different. It means giving up church as we know it. Some things that we love, some things that make us feel comfortable, make church feel like church, may go away and never come back. It's a change of heart. People of color are attracted to Unitarian Universalism for the same reasons that white people are: the freedom to choose one's own beliefs and spiritual practices, the freedom to think for oneself, the longing for diverse community that devotes itself to justice in the here and now. These are faith commitments that transcend race and ethnicity. One thing is for sure, though. People of color never come to Unitarian Universalism for the purpose of integrating it. Right? You might be laughing, but I want you to take it seriously and really let it sink in. That's not what they're here for. It takes time and it takes trust to build relationships. I'm trying to be as frank as I can be. The ability to choose a faith community based solely on what you believe is a privilege that is usually only available to white people in this country. Hear it again. The ability to choose a faith community based solely on what you believe is a function of white privilege. Why? Because for people who are not white, there are also safety concerns. Am I safe in this community? Am I safe in this neighborhood? Will a passing police officer wonder why I'm here? Will a greeter wonder why I'm here? Will people stare at me if I raise my hands in praise while I'm singing the way I used to do at my old church? Is it safe for me to name casual racism when I see it in this church, or to name privilege, or will I be asked to step down from the committee? Wouldn't it just be easier to worship in a faith community where I don't really believe what I'm hearing from the pulpit, but I can at least relax? Many of you who are white might be sitting there thinking that would never happen in this church. But the truth is, you don't know whether it would happen. You really don't. We'd all like to think it would never happen, but it does happen all the time in all kinds of faith communities. If it weren't happening, do you think that Sunday morning would continue to be the most segregated hour of the week in America, even now, over 60 years after Dr. King first popularized that aphorism? My colleague, Reverend Laura, down at South Valley, and I have been facilitating a book group this year on this year's UUA Common Read called Mistakes and Miracles. This book is so wonderful and so hopeful that it's still sold out at the UUA bookstore, which is so frustrating. You can get it on Kindle if you want, if that's an option for you. So we just finished the first case study this week about the church in Annapolis, Maryland, and what happened after they hired an African-American minister. Microaggressions toward the minister about his style, his level of education, his perceived amount of God language, even the neighborhood he grew up in. Questions about governance and power. A fight over a Black Lives Matter banner. Predictable, right? A praise-themed worship service that struggles to get enough support. It's all in there. All things to which we might be inclined to exclaim, that would never happen here. There's a feeling that because none of us want to be racist, because none of us perceive ourselves as racist, that becoming an anti-racist congregation would be a foregone conclusion. And we were surprised to read about how that did not work out for this congregation in Maryland. They're doing pretty good right now, by the way. They've been at it a long time, and they're doing great work. But listen, Unitarian Universalists, and hear me good. We cannot book group our way out of this one. We can't. That's not how we're going to get there. Having the right frame of mind might be a good start. And for some of us, it's a first step that makes sense. But if we really want to have an anti-racist community, if we really want diverse, multicultural, beloved community, we have to change on an emotional level. We need the right frame of heart. And we can't get that by reading the right books. We get that by getting real about how we feel and how others feel. We might make mistakes, but we're serious about repair and repentance. Yes, repentance. The Greek word metanoia means to turn your mind around. We need to be quick with a sincere apology. We need to learn to recognize defensiveness and cut it off ruthlessly. We need to be able to laugh at ourselves and be honest with ourselves, to isolate and examine our biases curiously, as well as our shame. And all of this takes practice. So that means people of color in our faith will have to endure a lot of what I call white people nonsense while we get it together. And so the invitation to you, people of color, is to commit to take care of yourself, to have a vision for what beloved community looks like for you. Remember that Unitarian Universalism is larger than its individual people. It's larger than its ministers, larger than its shenanigans. There are UU groups just for people of color to get to know each other, make cross-country connections, find resources that renew and restore your faith. And I would be delighted to help you make those connections. What's special about the 8th principle, the reason we need it, even though the other 7 principles call us to the various projects of racial justice, is that the 8th principle is the only one that includes the word love. You can look, you can check if you don't believe me. Think about it. Our other principles talk about justice, but no principle calls us to acts of love. And the only way we get to the beloved community is through love. Love that goes beyond books, beyond borders, beyond categories, beyond budgets, beyond walls, beyond one weekend a year, beyond 30 days of love. Love beyond belief. That's how we get there. Will you rise once more with me and sing? Number 95, but once you get it, you're not going to need the book. Please be seated. If you are like me and you need spiritual practices to nourish you in your quest for love and justice this month, I invite you to join me in the 30 Days of Love. The UUA will post new practices for each week on Monday, although I peeked and actually they're live right now. So you can use them all week long. Things like there's story time for kids, there's prayers, meditations, body practices. Go to sidewithlove.org and then choose 30 Days of Love from the drop-down menu. Or you can follow Side of Love on Instagram. It's a little bit different. Or Facebook. Side of Love on social, Side with Love on the browser. I'd love it if you participated in this. For now, let us extinguish the chalice with these words by bell hooks. Everywhere, we learn that love is important, and yet we are bombarded by its failure. This bleak picture in no way alters the nature of our longing. We still hope that love will prevail. We still believe in love's promise.